776, and this has to do with the death penalty. Now, I didn't have anybody to really speak in favor of it, so I can ask that either Representative Brumbaugh or Senator Dahm or Representative Mulready, would any of you like to talk on it? You're going to talk in favor? Okay, because I'm going to go on in opposition. All right, come on up. Everybody knows and loves our radical Senator Dahm. And he is my senator, and I love my extreme senator.
I heard from her plenty before I was actually her senator, though. So, and when I say in favor, I'll just give the background, the reasoning for this. Okay, in Oklahoma statute, we currently have the death penalty, and we had several different provisions. First of all was the electric chair. If that failed, then we would do the lethal injection, and then the third option was firing squad, and then the fourth option was hanging. We no longer have an electric chair in the state of Oklahoma, so that's not an option. So we were doing lethal injection. You all heard all the news stories about the botched execution that happened. The reason that happened is because the lethal injection chemicals, the medicine that is used for that is generated over in Europe, and it's not created for that specific purpose. Europe has refused to continue to provide that. Those European nations have refused to provide that here to the United States because they knew that's what we were using it for. So we've had to use compounding pharmacies or whatever to create that ourselves, and that's caused some issues. So without being able to continue doing lethal injection, the next step was going to be firing squad. We were going to have to bring back firing squad for executions in the state of Oklahoma. So this last year, Senator Sykes was the one that led the charge on this, and I actually saw him last night. I invited him to come up here, but he was already committed in case he wanted to come talk about it. We put in a new form of lethal injection, or excuse me, of execution that is called nitrous something, I forget what it is.
So it's like a gas. It's a gas.
But essentially they just pump nitrogen into the room, which nitrogen is already a part of our atmosphere. You know, we don't just breathe pure oxygen. We breathe in nitrogen, but enough nitrogen causes you to essentially fall asleep and just never wake up. In fact, a lot of the people that are pushing for the death with dignity and euthanasia and stuff are saying that this is the most humane way of ending a life. So they're actually in favor of it, even people that are concerned about the humane aspect of it. So we put that in statute. But there's a judge that said that they're planning on challenging not just that, but any form of capital punishment, and we don't have constitutional protections in our state for the death penalty. So if they struck that, if a judge was able to strike that out, then we would have what happened in California back in the 70s when they had a family known as the Manson family. You've heard about that, you know. And what happened with the Manson family, the reason he's still alive is because a judge in California said that there's no constitutional protections for the death penalty in California, so he struck it down. So that's why Charlie Manson is still imprisoned. So what happened is they actually, after that happened, California passed death penalty provision, put it in their constitution. This is modeled partly on California's, partly on a couple other states, but what it does is it just puts in the constitution, says that we can have capital punishment. There is a provision in there that says unless any method of execution shall be allowed unless prohibited by the United States Constitution. That means no cruel and unusual punishment shall be inflicted, so it can't be cruel and unusual. That's why that provision is in there. So that's kind of the background on it. Those that are in favor of capital punishment obviously would be in favor of adding this to the Constitution, so we have those constitutional protections in case a activist judge decides to strike down the statute and say that capital punishment can no longer be allowed anywhere in the state of Oklahoma. So that's the reasoning in favor of it.
But we already have the death penalty in law, so you're not necessarily opposed to the death penalty if you're opposed to 776.
Correct.
Because we already have it in law, and last year they passed House Bill 1879, which gave the list of the order in which the executions would occur. If there was not the lethal injection, then it would go to to the
Fire squad.
nitrous, whatever,
Now
and then it
now
would
it
go
includes that.
to, I thought it included the electric chair.
It did, but we don't have an electric chair.
Okay, well,
So-
we can make one.
We'll task you with that. We'll task you with that.
I know.
We'll give them a Samsung Galaxy and we'll just let it explode.
Yeah, they can have a Samsung 7, and, but no, you're not necessarily, because I believe in the death penalty. I think that it does, I'm a pro-life person from conception to death, but I believe that the death penalty does not need to be placed into our Constitution. And the reason being, I think that anytime we look at voting on something to put it into the Constitution, we need to think 2 or 3 times before we do it, because it's gonna make it that much more difficult for people to be able to change it later on. Right now, we favor the death penalty, but 50 years from now, they may not. And so it would take a vote of the people to remove that from our Constitution. It also removes the responsibilities of our legislators of having to vote on things in regard to the death penalty and executions. So I'm just asking that you think a couple of times before we look at putting the death penalty into our
But
Constitution.
To clarify, the exact language of it right here says, all statutes of the state requiring, authorizing, imposing, or relating to the death penalty are in full force and effect, subject to legislative amendment or repeal by statute, initiative, or referendum. So we still can change and amend the statute. It's just saying that they're currently in effect. And so it does have provisions. It doesn't totally punch from the legislature
Okay.
having to deal with it. So the legislature still would have involvement in it.
Okay.
So there are provisions in that
Okay,
also.
that's my concern,
So-
is
Quick
one of my
question.
concerns.
Okay, would this still, let's say 10 years from now, the legislature decided that the death penalty was immoral, they can pass a law saying that they're not gonna do it anymore,
Mm-hmm.
in spite of what this, in spite of what you're saying right now.
They-
Is that true?
You're saying that if we, 10 years ago, or what, I'm sorry?
10 years from now.
10 years from now,
If you
sorry.
wanted to abolish the death penalty, this doesn't prevent you from doing it.
It doesn't necessarily prevent us from doing it. We would have to, if we were to abolish it entirely, this would put the death penalty protections in the Constitution. If we wanted to abolish it entirely, we would have to do a constitutional change, like Rhonda is saying, a
Why?
repeal or
Could you
something.
Could you just eliminate that as a penalty for all laws?
I mean, that would be a workaround, yeah, we could make that no longer a penalty. We could make that no longer a penalty for it, but, so there is a workaround
So
to it, yeah.
there's legislative ability then to eliminate the death penalty in spite of this constitutional amendment. It just gives you the right to change that again later.
Basically,
Okay.
yeah, so.
I'm not seeing, I'm honestly not seeing
Then-
what this, how this prevents anything from being done.
Basically, this is trying to prevent activist judges from eliminating it,
Other than that, I don't
from
see how it
overturning
does
it.
anything.
Yeah, honestly, that's what it's for, is to try and eliminate activist judges from being able to do that. Yeah, the legislature could still repeal or refuse to allow capital punishment, yes. Or the people could by initiative petition or whatever if we wanted to through a constitutional change.
But we also know how difficult getting initiative petitions are, and we also know how the wording on the ballot makes all the difference in the world, even if you've done all the work necessary to get it put on the ballot, so,
But it's easier just to change the penalty.
well, that's fine. But I mean, 776, this is what 776 is about. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask in regard to 776? Nope? All right, let's move on to 777 then.